This video is sponsored by Audible.
You know, this place makes me wonder. Which would be worse? To live as a monster? Or to die as a good man?
Detective Teddy Daniels' final statement in Martin Scorsese's adaptation of Shutter Island still haunts me to this day. It solidified Shutter Island as one of the first films to truly define my perception of cinema as a way of communicating deeply personal feelings and sentiments. I never mention it in my videos because, honestly, I've only ever seen the film once, and other than reading the book it's adapted from, I could never bring myself to watch it again. I think without that final statement, Shutter Island would still be a solidly faithful adaptation of Dennis Lane's novel, but by extending beyond Lane's abrupt yet poignant conclusion, it transcends into something agonizingly profound. Heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, soul-destroying. I could throw a magnitude of words to describe the impact Shutter Island had on me, but I think the best word is one that I use quite a lot because it's one of the few descriptions you could give to a story that would personally unnerve me. Inconsequential. The idea that the goal or strive for purpose proves to be insignificant, trivial even, that all the trials and tribulations you battle through to seek clarity or truth end up surmounting to an answer that you didn't really want, one that provides no catharsis or fulfillment. While we all want the truth in life, most of us fear the reality. The truth hurts and it can be hard to comprehend, especially when the answer you're searching for isn't in your favour. It takes everything you once believed in and proves it to be invalid and futile. Perhaps you're the problem, maybe you're what's wrong. The bad guy, even. I recently rewatched Shutter Island again because of this very specific line of questioning. I sometimes doubt my morality when it comes to interacting with others, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this. I don't mean it in a horribly detestable sort of way. I'm sure you get where I'm coming from when I say I'm unsure as to what perception people have of me because of how I made them feel due to something I said, or perhaps how they preconceive me based on what they've heard from others. This is even more nerve-wracking when you think of everything that's bad about yourself and begin projecting it into everything that you do, to the point that it keeps haunting you with the fear that you'll never escape your past, no matter how much you try to reinvent yourself. Shutter Island is a mystery thriller about a detective trying to find a missing patient, only to end up facing his own demons as he confronts the monster he once was, or still is. It explores morality and mental illness from the perspective that humans are inescapably flawed, that nobody is free from sin, and that we shouldn't simply judge or condemn without at least trying to understand each other, whether that leads to revelation or not. I know Shutter Island deals with a more extreme perspective on this, but as someone who uses the genre to channel fear into therapy, like when I talked about Midsommar and Hereditary, I see Shutter Island as about finding comfort in your experiences, by taking horrors that we all try to reject or repress, and accepting pain as a vital part of the healing process. As appropriately cliched as it is, Shutter Island is about using our human journey to best understand the destination. So let's talk about it. To set the scene, upon arriving at Ashcliff Hospital for the criminally insane, Detective Teddy Daniels and his partner Chuck begin investigating the disappearance of a patient called Rachel Solando who drowned her 3 children. After following a series of clues and being continually psychoanalyzed by the creepy doctors, Teddy discovers that he is in fact the missing patient this entire time, and is following an elaborately constructed roleplay designed by the doctors as an experimental new way to make him confront his trauma and sanity after he murdered his wife for drowning their children. When I mentioned inconsequential, I was referring to the story's bleak ending where, despite several failed attempts to enact the roleplay, even after all this time, Teddy still reverts back to his delusions, prompting the doctors to resort to the most extreme measure of a lobotomy, which will permanently stop his aggressive behaviour, but in turn will mentally impair him forever. It's sad because, like the doctors, you hope Teddy will get better, and he doesn't. Except where Scorsese's adaptation takes this further is by introducing Teddy's final line, where it heavily implies that he consciously chooses to continue living his lie, rather than live every day with the overwhelming guilt of his actions. In a way, it's an abstract form of suicide. Now, the thing is, it seems that all anyone ever talks about regarding Shutter Island is the blatant foreshadowing of its twist ending, and to be blunt, I think it's a completely superficial way of appreciating the greater nuances of the story, much like The Sixth Sense. Noticing the cracks in the setup is not the point of the story. With that mindset, you're actively denying yourself the intricacies of the emotional journey that defines the story. If, to be fair, one could argue that the subtle distractions of the clues play right into Teddy's psyche. While I respect people like to point out the foreshadowing to highlight the cleverness of the filmmaking and the necessity of attention to detail in storytelling, I also fear it runs the risk of disingenuously devolving the twist into something that seems purely gimmicky to those less interested in the emotional artsy-fartsy side of things. What I love most about the storytelling is that it has this poetic duality of a man trying to chase down the truth while also actively running away from it. Conversely, the inconsequentialism of Teddy's discoveries have a similar duality to the doctors, who hold a significance that tends to be understated.
I have this radical idea that if you treat a patient with respect, listen to him, try and understand, you just might reach him.
These patients.
Teddy cynically thinks everyone is unsupportive and conspiring against him, that everyone is wearing masks to hide ulterior motives. Now, taking away the context of the mystery and applying this logic to many people with mental health issues, the notion it perpetuates the entire time is that Teddy is all alone, trapped in his own bubble, or specifically, he feels this way regardless of the actuality, which comes full circle when his partner Chuck, in the end revealed to be his doctor, goes missing. In reality, they are the absolute opposite of the villains they've been cast to play. They're very compassionate, sensitive, caring, and undoubtedly want to help him. But like I said at the beginning regarding preconceived perception, we tend to judge people externally based on how little we actually know of them. Hell, they're trying so hard to delay the board's decision to lobotomize Teddy because of his violent tendencies by working around the clock to prove their revolutionary psychiatric experiment will work. The film especially is very cleverly cast by having it change your perception on what you know about typecasting villains and misunderstanding intent without the greater picture from their perspective. I don't think the story is truly trying to hide the schematic from you, but instead give you enough suspicion to doubt the world around you, creating quite an alienating atmosphere that really accentuates a loneliness brought on by Teddy's distrust. I think when you put aside Teddy's crime, the sheer psychological realism generated by Teddy's anxiety and constant existential questioning is exactly what an overthinker, at least from my perspective, tends to do. I know everyone's situation is different, that's why I don't speak for anyone other than me, yet I find this story understands mental illness as more than the simplistic fashion a lot of media tends to perceive it as. It's non-judgmental and never behaves behaves condescendingly about its portrayal of Teddy's experiences. We understand he's a murderer and we can't simply absolve him or defend his actions just because he acknowledges them, but that doesn't mean we can't feel something for him. It underpins his crime as provoked by a life of pain and hardship and post-traumatic stress inflicted on him by war. Teddy is presented as neither a hero nor villain. Like the doctors, we empathise with him as strictly a human being, someone who, in a completely devastated, broken moment, unleashed all his repression onto a person who took everything away from him in an instant. The part of the story that got me the most was the split ideology between the staff and those who seemingly want to help Teddy by encouraging him to let go of his wife. It introduces two extremities of confronting fear. You either choose to confront it head on and take control of it, or you gradually move on and refuse to let it have any influence over you. I don't think the latter is so much repression as it is pretty similar to confrontation. By moving on, you're freeing yourself from the burden, as long as you're taking appropriate steps to truly move on, as opposed to lying to yourself only for it to build up beneath you and attack your senses when you don't want it to. Confronting it is just as hard because you're teaching yourself to coexist with your fears, something which Teddy chooses not to do, nor can he simply move on because there is nothing to move on to. He virtually has nothing left to truly live for. While I would like to say Shutter Island leaves us with a shred of hope, it ultimately doesn't. However, if I were to say something positive, the story shows us this isolating, depressing world where the patients are treated as monsters, and here we are in the shoes of someone who is perceived by society as a monster, but he doesn't look like a monster, because he's not. Actions aside, there is humanity behind the external, like the doctors who we treat initially as villains. I guess, in a way, Shutter Island challenges our inherent prejudice. It's not saying everyone is necessarily redeemable, but rather we should be less cynical in our judgment, especially when we don't have the insight to fully understand the greater picture. Self-reflection is a powerful thing. If we all surrender our egos for just a moment, I would like to think we're all capable of forgiveness. I'm not a religious guy, sure, but I do believe we should keep fighting for each other rather than against each other. Like with Teddy, none of us are prepared for anything that life throws at us. So rather than continually boiling up hate, even if we don't realize it's hate, we should release it in the hope that anyone and everyone, if they sincerely try and want to, can be healed. Hey folks, thanks for watching. This video is sponsored by Audible. Audible is home to thousands of audiobooks and spoken word entertainment, ranging from bestsellers to podcasts to even business and self-development. As I'm always on the move these days, I started using Audible to catch up on some titles I've always wanted to read, and because I'm dyslexic, it does take me a considerably long time to get through a book, so it's nice to have a bit of leisure to get absorbed into a story. I'm currently listening to Bad Blood by John Carreyrou about the whole Theranos controversy, but I want to make a sincere, specific recommendation to the audiobook of Shutter Island if you feel this story touched you in some way or another. If you want to give Audible a test drive for yourself with a free 30-day trial which includes 1 free audiobook and 2 free Audible originals, then visit audible.com/Hollinger, or if you're old school about it, text Hollinger to 500-500 to get started. And if you already have Audible for yourself, give me some recommendations in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.